Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Jochum Strength Insider. The Jochum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Jochum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with the Jochum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Jochum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
We are back with season 5, our first guest of season 5. Pretty excited. We got our first guest with Tristan producing and live host here. The election was yesterday, so I think we should all go around and say who we voted for yesterday and start the pod. No, kidding. Kidding. We got Mr. Olympian with us. We got Mr. John with us. John, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Nah, thanks for having me, dude. I'm super stoked to be here. This is super cool. Like I was saying before we even got on here, like I feel like I knew you, but you didn't know me. So this is like me meeting my hero in this current moment of just because like it's like a moment I start trying to bench press. I immediately I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting super strong. And it's like, oh, I need to get into the functional training and doing all this other crazy stuff and the crazy training and having fun with my training. So no, it's super cool to be here. I'm glad to be the first episode. But yeah, let's dive into it.
Yeah, we should kind of talk about your connection to Tristan. Like what was that? How did we get to this point where Tristan was like, dude, we have to have this guy on? And I'm pretty sure, Tristan, you've told me to have him on before you were even a part of the podcast. So like Tristan's been bugging me to get you on for a while. How did we get to that point to where you are somebody that he really wants to come on this podcast?
Man, I don't really know where he wants me to go with it, but yeah, like in the early days, we had the same cycling coach, and he had just moved to Colorado Springs, I think, for the military. And yeah, long story short, my coach was like, yeah, you need to start training with this guy. Like, I think he's going to be good for you to come train with. And I was like, pretty much like a loner trainer as is. Like, I don't want to train with anybody. So I was like super hard on him, like from the get-go. He was like, yeah, we don't need to be at your house. I was like, well, the ride leaves at 10, so you probably want to be there super early. Like, just be checked in. And I was like, the ride starts at 10 and we're going to leave the house at 8 and you need to be there at like 7:50. And then he gets there and I'm like still in my boxers drinking coffee. And I'm like, yeah, so you want a coffee? So yeah, long story short, we'd probably been training together ever since then. And, me and Tristan kind of had the same goals, kind of this, and oddly enough, like as he grew in the sport of cycling, he slowly kind of met up with me and we teamed up, raced Madison together. Is that your first national championship?
Yeah, it was besides the team pursuit one, that was the first one that we were super stoked on. We trained through COVID together. We broke down together, yelled at each other and fought. Fought freehand.
Yeah, we had a few heavy blowouts, but yeah, I think that was probably the coolest thing is like, we pretty much got to train together through some of the darkest points and some of the brightest points, and then to win that national championship together was probably still one of the coolest races I've done, because of how we won it too. We destroyed that race. Like, we just literally walked over people, and it was fucking cool. And we were like super patient, and we followed a plan. I think I said Kama Sutra too in like the ending interview. Like I brought the Kama Sutra up because I didn't really fully know what it was, but they were like, "How in sync were you?" And I was like, "Yeah, we pre-read the Kama Sutra before we came here," or something like that. And
So,
like it just like flowed off the tongue. I did say that, didn't I? And
yeah.
like,
So Austin was, I had just started working with Austin and I read awareness. I
yeah,
read the awareness book and I gave it to John and he read it and he misspoke and said that me and him had been practicing and reading the Kama Sutra together, which I'll leave that to listeners to look up themselves. But yeah, said that to on the finish line interview that we had been practicing and reading
in
the
front of
Kama Sutra
everyone.
together.
Oh, we gotta
Yeah,
find that clip. Everybody was like, "What in the fuck are these two doing?"
yeah, dude. It was, but that's just how close we were. I think, and that's how it ended. So, but yeah.
So, oh, educate me here, Tristan. Were you like the newcomer? John was like the established person. Like, what was your approach to like meeting him that first day? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I had just got there. I had just gotten a coach, and John had already won nationals. And so when I turned up to the track, it was like some pretty, like in my opinion, heavy hitters. Like there was guys in stars and stripes jerseys, which signifies that they had won nationals. And so I was like, okay, I want to be around these guys. I want to work with them. And we had the same coach, and yeah, he told me he's like, yeah, show up, be with this guy. And I remember I showed up fully kitted up, like helmet on, shoes on, and it was exactly like he said. He was in his underwear, and I was like intimidated. I didn't know the route or anything, and I was like, I gotta make sure this is the best day I've ever had on the bike because I'm gonna be lost in Colorado Springs. I've been here for 2 weeks. But yeah, he was more established, and I was trying to get to where he was, and so it was one of those things of like, all right, he's where I want to be. He's who I want to train with. Like, let's not mess this up.
And kind of talk to me about John, that like how do you go about the process of gaining the trust of like a lifting partner like that? Because especially as like the more established person, it's almost like I'm thinking back to like when you're a senior in football and you have these freshmen come up. And the reason like you're so burnt out and like a loner trainer a lot of times is because you've had so many experiences of these guys saying they want it and like they don't fucking want it. And you can kind of tell like with one conversation, you're like, I'm wasting my fucking time. Like what was the process of like Tristan earning that trust to be like your race partner? Like how did that go about for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because like I literally just had a conversation tonight with somebody, and it's like, the half foot in, I want it, I don't want it, and I hope they're listening to this because I was really straight up with them. Was pretty much just like, you're not going to go to the Olympics with that attitude. Like, you take a break. Like, I understand that you're burnt out, you're tired, but we're all burnt out, we're all tired, and now's the best time for you to go. And I think with Tristan is like how he earned that trust. Well, one, he was just a good bastard to hang out with. Like immediately sets the tone. Like, just being a good dude to be around. And then on top of that, he was looking to support not only himself, but his friends at the same level. So like he was bringing whoever was with him up as well. And like that to me is really hard to find in sport, especially in cycling. It's super selfish, man. I mean, guys are going out and they're working out contracts and or working out teams and whatever else, and they're looking out for themselves. I mean, and a little bit of that you kind of have to do, and you kind of have to look out for yourself. But I, even even when it wasn't in his best interest, like I mean, even if it had nothing to do with his interest, but he was like, oh, this could work well for John. Like he kind of was there. And so that to me, like was a level of respect, like in its own right. Now, how does that bring him into the cycling picture? He didn't quit. And so for me, so many times he could have quit. There's so many times he could have stopped doing what he was doing, and national team coaches wanted nothing to do with him. He had a job, he had a life. Like it wasn't like cycling. Like for me, the difference between me and Tristan is like I came into cycling, and then he kind of went the job route and then found cycling and then wanted to pursue cycling. And so, whereas like, if cycling ended for him tomorrow, he would have been fine. Whereas for me, it was a little bit of like, oh shit, like I'm gonna have to hustle, like figure something out, whether I coach or branding, marketing. What do I do? Like when I'm not a professional athlete, what do I do? And he knew that. Like even he knew that. He's like, dude, this cycling thing can end for me tomorrow. I don't care. Like, but that to me showed that he just loved it. And so then you add all those things together, and then you look at a race like the Madison. And so the Madison is like a tag team bike race on the track, and you essentially like throw your riders in and you throw each other in. And I've taught a lot of people how to ride the Madison, and a lot of people have taught me how to, like, I worked with a lot of guys that, helped me learn the Madison. And what was good about Tristan is that he hit a point where he was even giving me feedback. So the entire time he was learning. And then there was a moment where it kind of all switched over, where it was like, okay, this is what I think works for us. What do you think? And so we had that open dialogue. And I mean, even near the end, I was gradually learning, and I probably was always learning, learning how to teach, learning how to coach through it. But then he started coaching me through it and started teaching me through it. And that's when it hit. Like, I was like, oh yeah, like this is good. Cause now I'm getting better. And that was kind of like one of those things where I always trained with people that were better than me. And I think that's what Tristan was, just alluding to, is like, I want to train with people that have the results that I want to have, if not more, right? Like I want to train with Olympians because I want to go to the Olympics. Like, what better people to train with? And then, with me, like I was still coming around the fact, well, why am I training with people under me? But actually in reality, those guys are what push you that much further. When you have a guy who could take your job at any minute, or you have a guy, it gives you that opportunity to not settle. And so the good thing about Tristan was that he kept me honest, but then at the same time, he helped guide me through a lot of that stuff and helped push me through a lot of that stuff. And so that was kind of how I gained that trust. And honestly, like to this day, like I feel like we could jump back on the bike and kind of start figuring it out again. It would take a bit, but we'd kind of figure it out. Like we'd get that. We just communicated well. I think that was the thing too. We just communicated really well.
How much does chemistry play a role in like the races? This for both of you. Like, is it kind of like a dance where you guys do need to, or is it just like a straight up, you just need two people that are fucking dogs and outputs, or is it like that chemistry is a big piece of it?
I think the chemistry is everything. I mean, when you say Tristan, like, I think that's actually like there was times where one or the other wouldn't be fit, or usually me on that end. Like, I think there was one time where I showed up and I was like 106 kg, which for me was like massive at the time. And so like Tristan's just like tossing me around, and then like we'd go out and we'd have like, dinner, and I'd order a milkshake, and he's just like looking at that milkshake because he's like, oh fuck, tomorrow I gotta throw that milkshake, and so like there's been a few of those. But yeah, I think and we would still win. Like we would still win just because we knew where to position ourselves. We knew how to communicate with each other. We kept level heads. Like, I mean, the nationals that we won, like we were losing. Like we were like in second place for the first half of the race. And we that was the plan, was to just stay super chill, force the guys to sprint harder than us, save the legs, and then when they really, really go for a sprint and they start to look like they're cracking, lap the field. And then we just did that. And then we just never came off the gas.
Yeah, I think the chemistry was so important. And it's like, also it was finding someone, because it's so many times in any sport. It's like, it's not like a football game where there's a break every, 30 seconds and you can kind of recoup or figure it out. It's like, if you mess up, like there's no break in the action for it. And it was finding someone who you knew, like you'd be more ashamed of yourself if you quit than like anything else. And I think that was the most important part, was finding someone who like you were scared to quit on. Like it was like, I would rather be hospitalized than quit on this person.
Yeah. And you couldn't, yeah, you just couldn't give up. And I think that, like, once you found, again, that's what makes him a great teammate, because you're just like, well, he's not going to quit. And so, yeah, I think that's the chemistry. I think chemistry and culture is everything in those environments. And I think it's going to win a race every single time.
You mentioned some of those moments where you guys were like yelling at each other, and this is where it's like you have these insanely high pressure situations. Jobs are on the line, contracts are on the line, national championships are on the line, right? These are not, it's not like a JV high school football game where like, you can go out there and like have fun. Like things actually matter to win. Like and like when you guys like how Tristan sent me these races where it's like it's you said there's no like timeouts. It's not like football where you can have a timeout, recoup, get everybody like back in. It's like a high pressure, like we're going and you have to figure this shit out going fast as fuck, right? Like you don't have time to like in between. What were those like high pressure situations like? Like how did you guys handle those? Did you have any breaking points where you're like, all right, we need to fucking reset and recoup? Like what are those moments like as a team there?
I think, and honestly, Tristan was probably a lot better at it than I was. I think there was a lot of times where, I don't really remember us like fully getting into it in the race, just because everything's happening so fast. And so like, yeah, there'd be like a couple like loud moments, or like, get your shit together, like check the fuck back in, like kind of conversations. But you don't really have that much time to be like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And like have a conversation. Like you can't really have that conversation. You got like 10 seconds to, or like not even, you got like a split second to go check in. And like, even then you like hope he gets the in part. He's just like, check what? And so it's really like we would get off the track, and your heart rate's here, and you're fucking going, and then whatever happened, result good, bad, or indifferent, you then get off the track, and then you both have a disagreement. But I think the amount of times that we would get like in each other's throats, and then one of us would end up cracking a joke, and it was almost like, dude, really? Like, are we really getting upset about this? And then we'd like tune back in, and then we'd actually debrief the race. And I think that was another thing. Like, even when we won, we debriefed the race, like what we could have done better. We were always debriefing the race. And so like for the heated moments, and yeah, like there was a few, but it's really hard to have a calm conversation at 180 beats per minute when things aren't going your way, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, Tristan, you got other thoughts? Because like when you said that, like I was like, oh man, maybe I'm on the other end of the spectrum. Like maybe there was times that we like really, really got into it, and I can't remember. But like there was no, like I can't think of a time that we were in a bike race and I wanted to rip your head off. Like there was nothing like that.
No, the only thing was we had a disagreement one time, I recall. We didn't talk to each other. We were living in probably a 500 to 600 square foot apartment, 2 bedrooms.
You guys living together?
Yeah, at a race for like 5 weeks.
When was which is this one in T-Town?
Yeah, we're living in this like 2-bedroom, like little 500 square foot apartment. We got in a disagreement mid-ride, like training ride. I slammed on the brakes and turned around. I turned around. I just did. And then for the next 4 to 5 days, we didn't talk to each other, even though we were in a 500 square foot apartment. And then
we were in the same room.
Yeah. It got
were
to
you guys
be
training together during this time you weren't talking? No.
It got to be the day before a race. And he just went, all right, dude, are we fucking doing this or not? Like, and I was like, yeah, we're going to do the race. And like that just clicked back on. Because we had to lock in and actually do it. And that was one of those disagreements that really no one should have had. But we locked in, figured it out. And it really takes living with someone and appreciating them to like understand where their head's going to be at on race day.
What's your like disagreements in those moments? Like what are you guys like arguing about on the bikes? Like how does that
I don't even remember.
Nothing. Honestly.
Yeah, I don't even remember. Like I think I think the hard part is, and like, now that he brings it up, is like, like living together. It's like I feel like we skipped, a majority of what we did. I mean, essentially, like we were kind of blacklisted from the national team. Like, I think this is the best way to put it. Like, I think we had a phone call with the national team coach driving up to this place, and him pretty much telling us that he wanted nothing to do with us, and that we could kind of figure it out and do it on our own. And then you have like us shelling money out of our pockets, chasing a dream. I haven't seen my wife in, I don't know, 8 months at that point. Like, I left in March, and it's, or it would have ended up being 8 months, but I left in March, and now it's July. Haven't seen my wife, and you haven't seen your girlfriend, and like it's just been me and you living in a bedroom, like literally in a bedroom together. Like, I'm on a couch, you have the bed, and we have another like 4 weeks there. And yeah, like and we're like trying to get ready. We're trying to like prove a point, but also still have fun. Because I think that was like one thing that we realized, is that whenever we were racing, because it was like a test or we needed a result, like I think the wheels came off a bit. Or at least it did for me. Like, if it felt like a staged thing, like it didn't go well. Like, if we just went out there and raced and did our job, cool heads, like it was a completely different bike race. And so yeah, I think a little bit of that was just like emotions from pushing ourselves to be Olympic level athletes on our own dime, while you pretty much have a national team that's like, yeah, you're not going to be a part of this. Like, I don't care what you do. And then we're beating all those guys, which is also like, is the kind of the comical point of the whole point of the thing. But yeah, no, like our arguments 9 times out of 10 were like, it would have been like, hey, I think you should ride longer. And he's like, I don't want to ride longer. Like, I honestly think that could have been it.
We were arguing over sets and reps, and it led to not talking for a week.
Yeah, like it was the dumbest thing. Like, and you would think it'd be something cooler, like, I don't know. I've left a toilet seat after me fell in, and he's pissed off about it. I don't know. But yeah, it's nothing cool like that. It's just like, yeah, you should ride an hour longer. It's like, no, I'm trying to follow this and blah, blah, blah. And this is why I'm doing it. And it's like, well, that's dumb. Okay, fuck you. And then it's like 5 days silence. So.
Well, one of the things you said earlier, and I kind of want to tie this into like your guys' programming, because Tristan on our podcast was talking about the difference in riding approaches. It sounds like you guys probably are two of the people that do have a different riding approach. But first off, you mentioned we are all burnt out, we are all tired. And I think one of the things that sports science has done like a very poor job of is like telling kids it's okay to be tired, telling kids it's okay to, like, at some points shit's going to suck and you're not going to be peaking and you're not going to be PRing in every single like setting. And I think it has led to a ton of program hopping and a ton of just like way less work actually being done, way less progress actually being made in like the pursuit of science, because we sell them on this, like we sell them on the whoop scores, we sell them on like all of these data points that could be very powerful. Like they could be used in the best way possible. And all it has turned into is your whoop score is low, you shouldn't train today. Your vertical jump is lower today, you shouldn't train today. And then you have kids like growing up in this, like their training environment. Like I just started with this group of high school baseball kids yesterday. And I talked to two of these kids and I'm like, what grade are you in? And I legitimately, this is not to make a point, I legitimately thought they were 6th and 7th graders. And they told me they were juniors and sophomores in high school. Like they're 5 years under physically developed because of the sports like world that they grew up in, which is like, you always need to feel good. You always need to feel perfect. So like, what has been your kind of approach to like handling like the good of the science that comes with it and the bad and where it has taken it to like still keep that we are all burnt out, like we're all tired, but you still have to push through while still using some of the data that the cyclists have access to. And I'm sure sailing is the same way.
Well,
No, yeah.
to add to that, how do you do it for yourself? And then you're also a coach for athletes. Like, how do you do it for your coaches, like your athletes that you
Yeah.
coach?
And honestly, I take different approaches on all. Like in sailing, I took a different approach. In cycling, I took a different approach. I took a different approach multiple times. Um, and then with my athletes, I take a way different approach as well. So I guess let's start with my athletes, because I think this is probably maybe the softest. And I think I'm okay with saying this aloud because it's true. It's just like, look, they don't get paid to do this. Like they're not getting paid to go smash themselves. And so sometimes I have these hard conversations of like, look, you still got to be checked in to be a husband. You still got to be checked in to be a wife. You still got to be checked in to be, like you're with your employer. So like I understand that, like I coach heart surgeons, man. Like, and it's like I don't want you being fatigued while you're doing heart surgery. Like, you know, now that being said, we also got to do Leadville, and training is just like dieting. And if you want to lose weight, it's really easy. You burn X calories, just make sure you eat less than that. You'll lose weight. Boom. Fucking hacked it. You want to get better at something? Train. Fatigue the system. Fatigue it. Fatigue it and keep fatiguing it. Rest it. Fatigue it. Fatigue it. Keep fatiguing it. You'll train the fucking system, man. And so when when you're like, oh man, like, oh, I'm just so tired, like I shut it down because I couldn't get my power at 180. And it's like, well, your zone was 160 to 180. He's like, yeah, but the upper end of my zone's 180. And it's like, well, cool, just train off heart rate. Like, fuck your power. Like, just train off heart rate. Well, what about no, just train off heart rate. And so sometimes you have these conversations with athletes where you're just like, hey, like, view this. Now, when we start to see some heart rate trends where you can't get your heart rate up and you're really struggling, then maybe it's time to take a step back and really shut it down. And depending on where you're at in the cycle, really shut it down. But I think with my athletes, it's also reading the person, and eventually you start to see trends. And it's just kind of like what we talked about earlier. Like, what are you in this for? Like, are you in this for me to write you a workout program and you never do it? Or are you in this for me to write you a workout program and you do it and you follow it to a T? Or are you in this to just like, what are we trying to do here? And so with my athletes and managing rest and managing recovery and managing fatigue, it's really just like on a weekly, day-to-day basis of just like, where are we at? Now, that being said, we've had like hard conversations with athletes who they start missing day after day, and they're like, oh, I got work, I got this, I got that, I got this. And it's like, cool. How bad do you want it? Well, I want it so bad. It doesn't seem like it. Like, I mean, if you want it that bad, get up at 5 a.m. What about my sleep score? Mate, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I've won national championships with a 1 whoop score, and I've lost national championships with a 100 whoop score. So what about my sleep score? Like, I don't know. What do you want me to tell you, man? And so I think a little bit of it is like, what happens when you wake up on the day and you don't feel 100%? And you don't know how to even perform not feeling 100%. Like, the amount of times I've raced with my ass cheeks hanging out of out of my kit because I've crashed and I have to get back on my bike the next day and race. Like, or, the time I was sitting in the infield with my collarbone split open and I'm sitting here doing windmills trying to be like, and it's like pop, pop, pop. And I'm like, oh, fuck, do I get back in the race? Do I not get back in the race? Like, you have to have these thought processes. No, I did not get into the race, but you have to be ready to perform not 100%. And so that's my thing. And so then that tails into my cycling. you cycling, a lot of it is mental battle of like hard days in the rain, in the wind, by yourself. And the amount of times you want to quit, it is like it's once a week, every day. Like you could have a mental battle, and like one coach laid it out for me like this. It's like, if I give you 2 hours a day, every day, and you do an hour 45, and you're like, oh, that's good enough. Like at that point, like that's almost 2 hours of riding that you didn't do. Like, so you missed, like if you had a 14-hour week, you've now done 12 hours. And it's kind of interesting looking at it that way, and like looking at the training load that way, and like the training load over time. And so I kind of started taking that into kind of a thought process of like the last 20 minutes is the most important. Like that's where the gains are made, like to me. And so we did early when we were working with the coach, when we first met, we did some heavy sprint efforts and heavy like VO2 style training. And that was a lot about like, if I had a 1 minute effort, I was always do like a minute and a second. Like I would always like go that extra bit. And then we had like a couple years after that, we started working with another coach who was really big on volume, and it was pretty loose. And so like you just kind of did what you did. And he was really big on just like tons of zone 2 volume. And so we would bank hours after hours after hours. And then if we felt a little flat, like we were just honest with ourselves, and we'd maybe only do an hour and a half, but then the next day we'd go out for 6 hours. Like it was kind of a different philosophy, but you kind of like learned how to like just build this insane base and insane volume. And so how I managed that throughout cycling was, again, kind of with the same mindset, but like on a 10th degree of like, what happens when you don't feel good? What happens when the effort goes bad? Like if you're always shutting it down because you're not seeing the wattage, like when are you ever getting the work done? And then sailing. And we can go into that whole lifestyle here in a second, but sailing's a weird one because you have to have a onshore job. Like you work onshore. And so you're training like a professional athlete, and then you're also doing work on base. So like you're on your feet, like, 13,000 steps a day, like on your feet after doing like a gym session and a 2 to 3 hour ride, which is like a very casual day. Like, it adds up. So now you're working anywhere from like 12 to 15-hour days. And you're doing that 6 days a week. And you're doing that in the sun. And sometimes it's manual labor, lifting steel, like working in forklifts. Sometimes it's a little cushier where you're kind of sorting through bits and bobs and organizing bolts and whatever else. But the majority of the time it's pretty full on. And so the hard part about the sailing was just trying to find any time to rest, but also making sure that you're getting quality training in. And so how I manage that is just more or less like, I knew when I needed to be good. And so I didn't panic if I wasn't good when I wasn't good, if that makes sense. Like, cause that's like, I'd rather fail in my living room or even in the gym by myself than fail at a race or fail on the main stage. And so that's how you avoid those failures, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%, dude. There's so many good points that I wrote down here, but it kind of like all ties into the one where it's like, just be fucking honest. Like, and there's so many points in which like being honest matters, but like with yourself, like how bad do you want it? And then have a real honest conversation with how bad you want it. Because I'm the same way with my athletes. Like
I have plenty of athletes, they don't want it, and that's okay. And we have a great time training the 2 to 3 days a week they show up and they hang out and they're a part of a community. And then I have athletes that actually want it. But it's like, and then they ask questions about why they're treated differently. It's like, because one wants it and one doesn't, and they're just honest with it. And you can live such a better life when you're just okay with, like, you just admit, and they want other things in life, like the heart surgeon, like that's not a lazy person, right? Like that person went through a fuck ton of schooling and a fuck ton of really hard stuff to get to that point. They just don't want what we want. And I think it's all right with being that. But I like you said, I feel like a lot of athletes and people in general waste a lot of their lives not being honest about things. Like they spend so much time just lying about it. It's like, it's okay to not want it. You want other, I think you need to want something in life. I do. I don't think it's all right to be a grifter your whole life. Like, I think a lot of that's just, you're not going to be very happy with your life by the end of it. But I think a lot of people want things, but they lie about the other things that they want. And it's like, just be honest, man. And then once you're honest, we can build a program around that, right? Like we can build, okay, if you do want it, then this is how I need to treat you. This is how we need to treat yourself. This is how we need to treat our training. And we need to be a little bit of a hardo about this. And if you don't, that's okay too. And we can still get a lot of results there.
Yeah. And I think another thing is like understanding, like, it's not that you necessarily don't want it. I think you want it. I just don't think you want it as bad as you want the other thing. And it's funny because we talk about honesty. It's like, dude, I even deal with that. Like you probably deal with that. Like there's probably times where you're like battling with yourself, like, like, oh man, like I probably should shut it down today. Like today I was really having one. Like I didn't want to go train, for the second time. I've been doing 2 days. I've been trying to see like what kind of normal loading I can have with an 8-hour, work, 8-hour work day. Cause I've never had like a proper 8-hour work day. And so I've been like waking up like my athlete would, and then been doing like, 5 a.m. training and then going to work and then, doing the thing. Right. And like being this like normal person. And then after I get off work, I go straight to the gym and I lift. And I've been doing that for 6 days a week. And just to see kind of like where I'm at mentally, where I'm at physically, like what does it do to me? And yeah, dude, it's hard, man, because you're like, like yesterday I had to ditch a gym session. And so now I'm lifting on Sunday and riding on Sunday, but I had to ditch a gym session because, the wife calls me and she's like, hey, like there's this person here, and like life hit me. Like usually life doesn't hit me when it's like my thing. You know what I mean? Like I usually don't have a thing because I'm not that person. And so like, it was kind of interesting putting me in like, kind of almost like I'm in my athlete shoes finally, but the lying to yourself, because then today you're like, well, what do I like? I'm tired. I'm sore. Like I ended up being a later night than I thought. Maybe, it's crazy how quick it can kind of trickle. Like you can just start to trickle these lies. It's like, oh, like, well, I did miss yesterday and it wasn't that bad for me. Like maybe I just didn't get enough recovery. Maybe I should recover again. And my watch did say my body battery was like 2, whatever that means, because I know what the algorithm to that is. And so I probably should shut it down. Like you just have this like you end up like telling yourself these things and you end up believing it, and then it's like this whole blame game of like why you're not fit. And like, dude, all the times I got fat, I'll tell you why I got fat. I drank beer, I ate, and that's it. Like I was still training, but I was on the piss and I was fucking eating. Like you're gonna get fat, man. Like it's just the way it is. Like, and so I think having the honesty with you though, and having that check-in also helps start the next path. Because when you check that in and you go, okay, like here are the things that are making me this way that I don't want to be. How do you shut it down? So fucking quit drinking piss, quit eating like shit. Like, you'll be fine.
Dude, and then the momentum of that inner voice, I talked about this on a YouTube video because I was like struggling with it for a while. It's like, if you let that inner voice win one time, how much easier it is for the next day for you to listen to it. It's insane. Like, and the more like I've become aware Like I literally like I'm a fucking psycho. Like I'll listen to the voices in my head, but like now, like I'm like picking up on like, oh, that is not you at all. Like that's something else, like in your fucking head talking to you. But like
For
I think
sure.
there's just so many people where it's like they can't distinguish between the voices. Like I think every single person I've talked to has that voice, but so many people, and I've been at fault of this too. It's like you let that run for so long, you can't distinguish that inner dialogue versus like your actual inner dialogue of who you are at your best, right? So it's like you hear that, you're like, oh, I should obviously trust what my head is telling me, but it's like, no, no, actually, no, like that voice is absolutely lying to you, and that's something else. I haven't put a figure on like what that voice actually is, but dude, I've been deep into the weeds of like distinguishing like the hungry voice too. Like when you like the amount of times, dude, I'm such a little bitch when it comes to like getting candy at gas stations.
Same.
I will be on a strict diet, and I walk into a store and like it's instant. It's like this wiring in my head, like, oh, it's not that bad if you go. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like you literally just like got done with a great workout. You're doing this motivational talk on YouTube, and you can't walk into a fucking gas station without like that voice popping up. And it's crazy, but like if you let it win, man, it continues to win.
Well, I think the best part of that is too, is like you have this battle, right? Like with the voice, it's like, okay, cool. Now I've just bought a pack of candy or whatever, and you leave. And then you're having an inner dialogue where it's pretty much just like, I fucking hate myself. Like, you piece of shit. Like you just lied this whole time. And it's like, that's the same voice that just told me to buy the candy. Why did you tell me to buy the candy in the first place, dude? Like, what the fuck? You know? It's like, and so you just like have this inner dialogue. Like your inner dialogue can't even be your hype man too. So he's not even like, yeah, dude, that ice cream's so good for you. Like, fuck yeah, just keep smashing. You definitely need it. Like, it's only before you buy it that they're hyping you up. But while you're eating it, it's just like, yeah,
And
you're a
it's like
piece
as
of
soon
shit.
as you eat it too. It's like that first
Congra-
fucking as soon as
yeah,
you crack it open, you're like, God damn it, bro. I'm such
congratulations.
a bitch.
Con- Congratulations, you've just ruined everything. so so yeah, I think, but what's crazy is like the moment you ignore that voice, the opposite hits, right? So you ignore that first voice, and then you got the hype man, like who's just like, "Fuck yeah, dude, you did it." And then you hit the scales, like, "Fuck yeah, you're doing it." And then you see yourself in the mirror, you're like, "Fuck yeah." And then you're hitting PRs in the gym, and you're like, "Oh, okay, here it goes." And then at that point, the voice is almost silenced. Like you're not even
Yes.
like it's crazy how quick that voice can get silenced when things are going, like the momentum's fucking just chugging along. Cause like the amount of times like I'll have these like inner battles of like, oh, I'll just do one beer. 7 beers later, 4 months later, like I'm off this like beer train. And like and I go down like, like when the cup ended or the America's Cup ended, I was just like, oh yeah, we're drinking. And literally like the last 7 weeks have just been like, beers and shit food and whatever else, and just kind of like decompressing. But I'm getting to the point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna ignore the voice. I don't need a beer tonight. And then you eventually just don't even want to drink anymore. And because you're like seeing the weight fall off, and you're like, well, I know that's what makes me look like the John that I don't want to be. And so you kind of then start to associate those things and get rid of them. And so yeah, I think that's the crazy thing, is that voice is always there when you're listening to it. But the moment you start to ignore it, within a few weeks, it's like almost silenced, like it's fully shut down. And I think that's really cool.
So I've actually never been able to see that voice take place in someone else, except for when I was living with John that last few weeks. So to give a quick little summary of it, we were in like the biggest block of racing and like the biggest, most important stuff that I perceive as important. But John had also been working towards becoming a professional sailor in America's Cup, one of the coolest things. And I could see as that was coming, the voice in his head for cycling was kicking in. Like his care as it was basically an inverse graph of like interest and like potential for America's Cup and interest in cycling was just going down. And it was one of those things. I think we literally finished a trip to Colombia. We come back and it was just like, I'm done. And it was like, I was sad, but it was also like one of the most proud I've been, because it was one of those things he could have kept on. He could have half-assed it. He could have just like stuck it out a little bit longer, but he just like, it was like that hard shutdown of he's like, I'm doing this thing. I'm committing to this thing. I'm gonna like take the 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and like he fully sent like the America's Cup, and I think that's when that was when I saw like it really kick off, even though I was sad that it was ending.
No, and it's funny you say that because honestly, man, like I think I stayed in it too long. Like I think I stayed too long, and I battled that daily with in T Town, and we were doing all right. We were going okay, and I was just like, what's the point? Like I'm not. I'm trying to do one thing, and I'm not that great at one thing, and I'm also not that great at this thing. But if I go all in on one or the other, I'd probably do really well. Like no matter which foot, like which way I go. And so I ended up just being like, me and Tristan were like, we wanted to race a World Cup together, and that was like the pinnacle. And I think I don't really regret much, and I think that's what I love about my sporting career. I don't think like I'll never be an Olympian. Like I'll never say that I'm an Olympian. Maybe I will in another sport. Maybe I'll do another sport and I can call myself an Olympian, but I can't ever call myself an Olympian. Now, I've done Pan American Games and won national titles, have a national record. It's like those things are cool. And the goal was to go to the Olympics, but I actually don't regret not making it to the Olympics. I think I did everything it took to go to the Olympic Games, plus or minus a few things. And um, I think I quit. I quit on a high note, man. I left on a high note, and I left because I had nothing else to give the sport, which in reality meant I wasn't going to go to the Olympics anyway. I would just be hanging on by straws. And so, yeah, like I said, I feel like I just kind of pushed it a bit long. And honestly, one thing I do regret, now saying it aloud, is that I wasn't that fit when we went to that Nations Cup. And like, I was fit. I just was like,
There it
I didn't
is,
want to get,
dude. It's come out.
I didn't, there's the voice. I was fit. Dude, I was doing insane numbers. It's just, I was scared to crash because I had that test in like 4 weeks. And so like, I didn't want to put myself in places that, like you could get injured. I mean, I remember in the elimination race, like, and in Colombia, man, fuck me dead. Like, you like those races are so scary, and like it immediately went off with the gun, and like dudes are headbutting. I think they restarted the race. Like we had already done 7 laps because somebody crashed in the neutral lap. Like, and I was just like, yeah, I'm out. And I was first one out. Like, first one out of the elimination. I was wearing the national championship jersey and everything. Like I was national champ, just like out the back. Like, and yeah, it was brutal. And so like I said, yeah, like my head wasn't in it, and I think that was actually like the worst feeling, like because you just like being at a bike race or being at any event where your head's not in it. It's almost worse than you not being fit. It's almost worse than like that's like I'd rather be sick than just not being like fully in it, because like you're just not fully in it. It's just almost like, why are you here?
Well, and dude, it's
But
dangerous at that point where like you've reached a
yeah,
level, like, and I think this is the thing, like, and I've realized this, especially business wise, where it's like, if you're not fully in it, but you're good enough at it to like be able to get away with not being fully in it, like where you could have did that
yeah,
race and like done enough to where like people would still look and be like, fuck, dude, I want to reach that level. And you're like coasting. And I think that is one of the like absolute worst feelings. Maybe it's just a man or like an athlete is where it's like, like there's more, and yet you're
yeah.
still almost getting rewarded for like your kind of, I don't want to say half-assed approach, but it's like that mental half-assed approach to what you're doing.
Oh,
You've developed a skill set that lets you get away with a lot of the bullshit.
100%. Because like you're at a World Cup, you're at a Nations Cup, and like it's an honor to be in a Nations Cup, and you're there, and like people paid for me to be there. You know what I mean? Like it's like, and so you're just like, yeah, that one kind of stung a little bit. But yeah, maybe that was some of the inner voice too coming out saying I was fit, but I think I was fit.
One of the things that I kind of want to for sure talk about before we end the podcast is that switch over from, so we've covered a lot of cycling, but what was
Yeah.
that switch over from cycling to sailing like, and what has that like journey and next chapter been, both psychologically but also like physically, like that total switch and the like, because you have to take a leap of faith, like you've developed yourself and you have an identity in this setting, and now you're going to a totally new. I thought I saw on Instagram that you've never sailed before you did this. Like, what was that kind of like process
Yeah.
of taking that leap of faith to go do that?
Honestly, man, it was just like it was a little bit about like, well, what am I going to do after cycling? And what was crazy is that, and Tristan can attest to this. You're pouring so much of your life into cycling. Like you're missing weddings, you're missing, family things. Your girlfriend or your wife. Like we got to be home at 8:30, so I can go to bed at 9:30. Like you're just shutting a lot of things out, a lot of people out. Like I think that's why we got on so well, is because like we could still hang, like we liked each other enough where we could actually hang out outside of cycling as well and not even talk about cycling. Like we could just do other things. And it's hard to do that with people that don't ride, because people want to go out on a Friday night and you're like, well, we got to be up early so we can go ride Saturday morning and train. And it's like this whole thing, right? And that's like our biggest day. And so the switch from sailing over to sailing was just like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I kind of like, I was getting pushed out of the sport that I was pouring so much of my life into. And I had this like mental battle of like, well, if I just jump to the next sport, like, does, my wife sacrificed so much for me to try to go to the Olympics. And does that make me a fraud? And like, you know what I mean? Like she gave up so much of her life and things for us to do is just so I can try to chase this dream. And I feel like I'm right there and I could get it. But at the same time, I literally have the coach who's most likely going to select saying, I don't care what you do, I'm not taking you. And that being said, I don't know if he's no longer there. So, maybe it would have been different. I don't know if I would have been even good enough to go anywhere. Like that's, to be fair. But yeah, it was a hard one. And so I sat down and had a conversation with my wife, and she was like, what do you have to lose to try it? And so I was in a hotel in Belgium and I just had that chat with the national team where it was pretty much like, yeah, you're out. And the sailing team had called me like, a couple months prior, and they were like, hey, we really want you to come to this camp. We really want you to test. And I was like, I don't know if I'm really that interested in it.
Where did that original connection come from to the sailing team? Like, how did that just
They
pop up out of nowhere?
kind of, yeah. They found me on, I don't even know, man. Like they got my number through a cycling coach, and
Got like a Tinder for cyclists or what?
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
Like pretty much. Ben Sharp, I think, was interviewing for a coaching position, and I think passed my number off and was like, would you be interested? And I was like, not really. Like it'd have to be a lot, like a lot to make me want to switch. And they called me and we were chatting and they were like, what would you need to switch sports? And I was like, honestly, man, at this point you've got me pretty vulnerable. Like if you have health insurance, we can have a conversation. And they're like, oh, I think we could do that. And then like I hang up the phone. They're like, can you come to this camp? I was like, no, I'm racing. Let me know when you guys are more serious. And the race didn't go that well. That national team coach was there. He's a bit of a cunt. And sorry, I don't know if that's a bit far on this podcast.
Oh no, you can say I've heard stories too. So I think,
and he's fucking is absolute muppet, Rob Stanley, and just got to make sure you get the name in there. An absolute muppet, doesn't know what he's talking about, and straight up just like was like literally being a child and like talking to riders about how bad other riders were and like just not appropriate, man. Like, look, I don't care if I suck, but just like don't be a 3-year-old. Like, have an actual conversation with me. And he couldn't even look me in the face. And there was like he couldn't even talk to Tristan in public. Like there was like he would just get scared or like, shell away. And but he loved to talk about athletes behind their backs, which again, that's a whole next level of a coach. If you're a coach that's doing that, bagging your athletes behind their backs, you're fucking Muppet, period. Anyways, rant done. I was at that point where I was like, okay, well, what do I do? And I'm in Belgium. I'm kind of panicking, and I call the coach, the sailing coach. I'm like, look, I'll come to the camp, but you have to. Is there any way that you can pay to send me to the Nations Cup after? And this was because we didn't really have any money in the budget to send me to the Nations Cup. And he was like, yeah, sure, no worries. And I went there. I flew in. I went there and I met the coach. I met Terry Hutchinson. I met Tom Burnham. And I met Baden Cashmore and Ben Day for the first time. And then I met the team. And it was so refreshing. It was so refreshing to be a part of a program and a group of guys that just wanted to get better. And the coaching staff really kind of like they cared. They wanted to see the athletes get better. Like it was new for them. Like they were just as excited. And this was like a whole new process. And honestly, that was the day I kind of was like, I think I want to do this. Like I think I bought in. And
just the culture and people, was that like it was just like
yeah.
Like
the culture sold me on it. Like I walked in and it's just a bunch of rowers and there was one swimmer at the time, and there was a few other grinders, but they weren't at this camp. And they all test, and they honestly look like they're all over the place on the bike, like no form, nothing. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna smash these dudes. Like I'm gonna smash them so hard. And like 30-second, like John Croom, best 30-second power. 4-minute. John Croom, second best power. 20-minute. I think there's 6 of us there. John Croom, 6th place, 20-minute power. And I was like, what? And I like look at all the wattages, and like dudes are putting out like 480, 490 watts for 20 minutes. They're just absolute just units. And yeah, like they pushed me to be better, and they wanted, like, it was one of those things where it's like it was refreshing to be outside of the cycling culture that I've always known, because this is like a new culture, and it was like a new vibe. And yeah, and then fast forward, like I got offered to be like go for a 2-week trial, which they were like, well, we don't know what you would do, whether that's, these guys are engineers and, you're just an athlete. We need guys doing shore rolls. And so I worked in every department. I just tried to be in every department. I wanted to learn everything, even if that meant I was sweeping your floors and taking your trash out for you. Like, I just wanted to be around you to see what you did.
So why, can you explain that side of things? Why do you have to work a job like with the state? Like, how does that work? Is it just because that's like how they pay for it? Like,
no, I think that's just the culture of the team. Okay. I think, and I don't think it's a have to. It's a highly suggested.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it was the best thing for me personally. I don't know if it was necessarily the best for some of the others, but it was the best thing for me. And now, mind you, I didn't end up being one of the highest powered athletes, and that could have had an effect on it for sure. Like, but I learned a lot, and I understood a lot, and I understood why we were doing what we were doing, when we were doing what we were doing. And coming from, like, we were literally getting a card to go sail in the biggest event sailing has. You know what I mean? And we knew nothing about sailing. And so
I think you have to like actually let people know how big this is. Like, I hadn't heard nothing about this, and it's literally F1 type budgets on water.
It's F1 on water, 100%. No, F1 teams like McLaren worked with Ineos, and we were working with a few teams that we can't name. And there's a few things that like F1 has a really high influence in this whole thing, vice versa. Like it goes back and forth, and yeah, like you're talking about like $120 million budgets on the low side, like, for campaigns. And so when you put that into perspective, and like we're building these boats by like you literally go, okay, here's a sheet of paper, like start drawing the boat. This is the rules. And like guys, you have designers literally by their brains are just spitting out this boat design and what it's going to look like and why it's going to look like that. And it's got to meet within these rules. And we got to find the gray areas because, we got to make our boat faster. And what are we missing? And you're waiting for other people to drop their boats so you can figure out like, oh, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Like, what are they doing? Like, and yeah, I think it was really cool. But because it's happening at such a high level, at such a high pace, it's kind of like, I think the best way to put it is like Olympic lifting. If you've never lifted before, you're not going to bring somebody in and clean and jerk. You're going to go through some movements, right, before they go. But bro, we were like clean and jerking with like 365 pounds.
Day one.
Like day one. Like, and so you're trying to find every cheat code of like, oh, do I pop my hips? Like, what do I have to do to like get this thing to move? Like, you know what I mean? And literally, like, am I still over my head? 100%. I'm in over my head. But yeah, like the team, like doing anything to help the team be successful, I think was the major thing, and to offload somebody, because I think the best way to put it is everybody's overworked because you just have this like limited amount of time to do the thing and to build the boat from scratch. Like you're building the mold, the carbon, everything's laid up from scratch. Like there's many parts that are found. And so yeah, the having that job was kind of like to help offload and essentially have some buy into the team. It's kind of like cleaning your bike, cleaning your gym equipment, like cleaning up after yourself, de-racking your weights. Like it's like, if I didn't have to de-rack my weights, like I would, and I didn't have to rack my weights, I'd in theory be more recovered, or I'd be rested. And it's like, come on, man, like just like go the extra mile. And so I think for me, it was really good because I got to learn different trades, and I got to learn why they do what they do and how they do what they do, and almost the process of why they do what they do. And that culture, that team, like, if I just stayed and trained, those guys would never see me. And so I wanted the people in the shed that built the boat, to see that I was working in my area, which is the bikes on the boat, that I was cleaning it, that I was servicing it, making sure that I was doing them justice. Like, yeah, they built me the boat, but I'm also making sure that stuff is fully dialed and race ready as well.
So tell me more about the actual race itself. Like, why do they bring Cyclist on? It's like it's all powered by these bikes. Like, how does that actually work? And what's the race look like? Like, how intense is this? Like, are you going to town for like 20 minutes? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, no, it's a full out effort for about 30 minutes. The pre-start is probably the hardest part. So like about 5 minutes before the race. So the way it works is you do this like pre-start sequence where the boats are trying to throw each other off before the race actually starts, and you have a start box. And
guys, what?
Like,
you guys are messing with each other before?
Yeah, so like before the race actually starts, and then you like you point at the line, like you target the line, and then it counts down, and then you hit the line at a certain time. And so like so you have 5 minutes inside that, like in that pre-start time frame, and you enter the box at around 2 minutes. And you come into the start box, and it's essentially like we're trying to, knock guys off the foils and like do these whole things. And then you line up for the race, and boom, you're on. And then usually it used to be, if you won the start, usually you were going to win the race. But that completely changed this campaign as the boats were a lot closer than we expected. And so it came down to some racing tactics, and Barcelona had some pretty heavy waves, and it was pretty wild. And so so that's kind of how that looked. But then as far as like the reason why they use cyclists is that was just the rule. Like there used to be 8 arm grinders on there, and they would grind with their hands and just like churn away, and they cut the crew in half. And so how you make up for that power was, cycling power, leg power.
So
And
there's
so
only
they brought
4
these
people on a boat.
Yeah, no, so there's 8. There's 8 total people, but there's 4 sailors. So there's 4 people doing functions, or 2 people, 4 people doing functions, 2 people trimming the sails, and that's the same people that are doing the functions, and then the 2 drivers as well. And then there's 4 cyclists. So there's 8 people total. And but yeah, so that's why they went down the route of cyclists, and we were one of the only teams that went the recumbent cyclists to kind of have more of a lower profile and aerodynamic profile, which was heinous, fucking awful. But it was I thought it was pretty cool because we were different. I was really into that, and I still feel like we have a really fast boat, even though we kind of got knocked out pretty early. I just think we had some bad luck head our way with an injury and some other things, and yeah, I just think we just kind of had some bad luck personally.
So, but you're on this bike on this boat for like 30 minutes, just going balls to the walls, or how does that work?
Yeah. So it's like it's really hard because it has nothing. The best way to explain it is like it's like you're going up a hill while somebody is shifting your gears, and it's never the optimal gear. Like you're pumping against a hydraulic pump, right? So like if the pressure is 0, it's really easy to spin. But as the pressure builds, it gets harder to spin. And so the way it works is as you start pressing buttons and things, it takes pressure, right? And so if a function takes like 200 bar and you have 300 bar in the accumulator or whatever, now you have 100. So boom, like it's a big spin, right? And so it's this like on off series, but it's constantly going because they're constantly moving functions. And then when you do maneuvers, it's also a big effort because you're rotating the mass and doing all these other things. And so really the effort is pretty much full out the whole race. I mean, almost to a point where we did full on race crews and warm up crews. Like we'd have a crew that we would send out, and we used to call them the roundup barroway crew, which is like when they would have the sails the deepest, and when they would go up into the wind and down into the wind, it was like they would literally just do that over and over and over again, and it was like for an hour. And you would just so they could get comfortable with the boat before the race, and so sometimes the actual warm-up crew had it harder than the race crew, and that was the funny part, right? And so you kind of had this like pretty heavy training and effort. But yeah, like the training and the racing style was like pretty heinous on water, because you just like you don't know how long you're going to be out there. Some days the boat would break and you'd be out there for 6 hours, no training, and then there'd be other days where it's like the boat's freaking flying and you just be out there for 6 hours and you're riding the whole time, like just smashing yourself. And so you kind of had to be fluid, had to be flexible and pretty open-minded, and that kind of takes me back to where the different training mindset, right? And so, but yeah.
Tristan, did you have something? No. I really like I definitely have to YouTube this more, because I'm gonna be completely honest, I had no idea there was cyclists on this boat at all. Like I literally just thought they were just
and there
was like some motor or some shit. Like I had no idea.
Yeah, and we move everything except the foils. It's the only thing we don't move.
It's pretty, dude. I've watched these races like on TV before and on YouTube, and I have never once known that. That's crazy. You learn something new. But the one thing, and this is probably the final point of the podcast before we get out of here. It kind of goes with the perform tired thing, and this is one thing that I really wanted to touch on with you before we left. It's like it is so freeing when you train tired and you know you can perform tired. And again, this goes back to the sports science thing, but it's like I think we do such a disservice to our athletes when we talk about the peaking and the deloading and the amount of pressure that puts on these athletes when they feel like they can only perform at their best. And I really do believe there is a certain amount of freedom that comes with the ability to know, like, my 90% is better than your 100%. And I've proven that to myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, man. It's like I was stuck in that thought process in college. I think about this. I was track and field is the worst with it because track and field is all peaking and deloading and tapering, right? And every time I deload, man, I felt like shit. Like, and I was like, and it felt like I had so much pressure to like everything has to come together. So it was like I would do this taper, everything would be perfect. And then I would have one bad night of sleep that week and would completely fucking like wreck my psyche going into that training when I had no business thinking that way. Like football, there was never any of that. Football is just like you could feel like a dog water, show up that day and have the best game of your life, right? Like, but it was
Yeah.
such a different culture. And I was like, the more I have approached the training in that meathead sense of like, just raise your total, like, raise your 100% to where your 90% is other people's 100%. And it frees you up so much as an athlete to where you can go out there and you don't have to have these tight buttholes because you know everything doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like when your butthole is loose, you
No.
perform well.
Well, dude, honestly, I think the best thought is like raise your 100%. It's like, dude, but the only way you can raise your 100% is when you're training at 90%, is when you're training at 80%, is when you're a bit smashed and you essentially put 100% effort in on your smash days. And that's the thing. And honestly, I think it builds the mental game a bit too. Like there's nothing more relieving when you feel like you're 80% and you go in and you do a training session, you're like, it wasn't that bad. Like that actually went pretty well. And like I couldn't tell you the last time. Actually, I could, and it was a whole thing. It was like I was about to say I couldn't tell you the last time that I actually like peaked or like I'm gonna taper. Like because in cycling you're just like constantly racing. And yeah, you don't go smash yourself like the week before nationals, but we'd race nationals and we'd go into a World Cup like 2 weeks later. We'd be doing stuff constantly, man. I mean, and how do you peak 8 times in a year? Like you don't. And so it's not possible, but you can be so good that you don't need to peak 8 times in a year.
Yeah.
Like that's I think that's what's massive. It's like, and with me, it's like the last time I peaked or tried to like taper, I just went like shit. I had a shitty day and I didn't go very well. And then I came in and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the test again the next day. And I literally went out that night and I had a few beers and like, I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, so shit. And I went in the next day and smashed the effort and it's almost like 20% better. Like just right off the rip. And I wonder if it was almost like I deloaded the stress from the deload week or whatever the fuck,
Dude,
Like
yes, I talk about that all the time. The deload is more stressful than fucking any training you could have done that week. Like trying to make everything perfect because life doesn't work that way. Like it works in a book. It makes perfect sense in a book, but it's like I know so many athletes that's like, man, if you had just drank a beer that week, you would have performed so much better. And I'm myself too, like even thinking about myself back there some days, like, dude, you should have just got hammered the day before and you would have probably performed way better than the stress of that deload.
And we actually have a guy on the team. I think he's like he does 4 beers before the night before he does the test, and he smashes it, man. He's an absolute weapon, and it doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone. I get it, and some people need that taper, that structure, that like whole thing. But personally, for me, any moment like test, like any of these things that like have these like heavy weights. The moment that I heavyweight my life around it, I choke. I don't know. Maybe that's just like maybe I do have performance anxiety. I don't know. It's kind of crazy that I'm realizing that 12 years later, but but on this podcast specifically in this current moment. But yeah, no, I think I think the big thing is that like really the best thing you can do for yourself is just deload any bit of stress that you have in your life and make sure that you're not adding any more stress than you already currently have in your life.
Fuck yeah, dude. This was awesome. This podcast crushed. Tristan, good recommendation. Episode 2, we'll go over you guys this Kama Sutra positions that we didn't cover today. So we'll save that for the next episode 2. But I appreciate you coming on, dude. Appreciate you spending time with us.
Nah, dude. Thanks for having me. It was sick.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Jochum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.